Yes, my bad. Hey, so glad that you're here, and it is the beginning of a brand new four series. But I want to tell you a story. When I was growing up, I was a teenager. I was a martial artist, believe it or not, and I practiced several different martial arts. But my main one was Taekwondo. And I remember I was so excited because for the first time, we were going to have a mixed martial arts tournament. Now, this back in the 90s was very different from what you know today as mixed martial arts. But I was excited because I watched movies and Bruce Lee, and all those things. I'm like, oh, this is great, right? I'm going to show my skills or whatever. So not to brag about myself, but just to put it in context, I was really good at it. And from 10 years of competition, I only lost 2 fights in 10 years. And so I was excited about this. And I finally made it to the championship fight. And here I am, and I'm standing in my corner, and I look at my opponent at the other corner. And this is a junior category, right? And I'm 16, and I'm like, there's no way that kid is 16, 17 years old. The kid was ripped. He had muscle, pecs, biceps, triceps, legs. He had a mustache. I'm like, that's a man. And in the beginning of the fight, I'm already afraid, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose this fight because look at that guy, right? So the fight starts, and we're at each other, and he's hitting me, I'm hitting him, at one point here, one point there, right? But he had a really, really strong punch, and I wasn't used to punching because Taekwondo is mainly leg work. And every time that he would fly at me and he would get through and he would punch me right here in the middle of my chest, it would hurt so bad, and I couldn't breathe for like a few seconds. And he did that several times. And by the end of the fight, I'm like tired. I'm like, I just want this to be over, right? But we were like really close. Well, the bell rings, and he continues to come at me. And he just punch, punch, kick, punch, punch, kick. And at that moment, I'm like, I'm not fighting anymore. So I'm just like protecting myself as I walk back, and he's just coming at me. So the referee comes, he stands in the middle, and he bridges that gap, and he puts us apart, and he looks at the guy, and he's like, he takes a point out, and when he took a point out, that's all I needed to win the fight. And he comes, he grabs our hands, and he lifts my hand, and I'm the champion. And I tell you that story because at that moment that I had already, I was tired, I was hurting, I was in pain, and he kept coming at me even though he wasn't supposed to. I was so glad that the referee stepped in. He bridged that gap for me, and he's like, hey, stop this. And that was unjust because, he was coming at me after the fact that the fight was already over. And he's like, hey, this is not fair. So I'm taking a point away from you, right? So I felt like that referee was, in that moment, for me. And I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, where you had, given all that you got, and you had been hurt, and maybe it was someone that was coming at you and being so harsh with you, and you just felt like you were alone. You felt like, who is going to help me? And then all of a sudden, someone stood in the gap for you. Someone's like, I am for you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to encourage you. Or maybe they put a stop to it. They're like, stop this, and you just felt like, man, that person is for me. Have you ever been in a situation like that? That's what we want to talk about. That's the kind of church that I want us to be, a church that is for God and for God's kingdom and for God's people. And the word for is a very short word, and it's a preposition that means in favor of something or in favor of someone. And I think that it's important as we kick off this series on for us to look into 2024, because there's something that's going to happen in 2024. Does anybody know what it is that's going to happen next year? Elections. That's right. And who thinks that next year's election is going to be a great time where everybody's going to be friends with one another, it's going to unite us as a nation, we're all going to be like, yeah, right? I don't think so, right? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a dumpster fire. That's the best term to describe what the election next year is going to look like. And as a church, we don't want people to know what we are against. We want people to know what we're for. And I'm going to explain to you the things that we're for. Right? So not this church. This church, in the year of 2024, we're going to focus on who and what we are for. Here, we're not going to point fingers. No, we're going to offer helping hands. How can I help you? We're not going to be divided by politics. No, we're going to be united in Jesus. We're going to be one as the body of Christ, the church of Christ. We're not going to be canceling anyone. Actually, we're going to be reaching out and showing the love of Jesus to everyone that we come across in the year of 2024. So we're going to bless, we're going to give, we're going to serve, we're going to love, we're going to pray for people and for God's kingdom to come to Rolando as it is in heaven, to come to San Diego as it is in heaven, to come to California and Baja California as it is in heaven. That's what we're going to do in 2024. So this series called 4 will do 2 things for us, okay? So here you go. It's a 5-week series, and we will end the ways of Jesus in this next 5 weeks. So if you've been part of our church this year, the words of our church is the ways of Jesus. And so these 5 weeks, we're going to end all the commands of Jesus that we've been working through this whole year. And at the same time, simultaneously, we're going to launch into this new initiative, this new spiritual journey for 2024 called 4. So 2 things that we're doing. So I encourage you to come and be part of it every single week. And as we begin, I want to talk about the way of compassion. So if we're going to do this, if we're going to show the world what we are for, we're going to need to exercise compassion. And so what I want to do is I want to tell you a story from the Bible, and then I want to encourage you how you can show compassion as we begin this spiritual journey. Well, this story comes from one of the Gospels of Jesus, and Jesus is, just to give you a context, Jesus is talking to the Jewish religious experts of his time. These are the most religious, the most holy people, the experts of the law, the Torah, the Word of God, and Jesus is speaking to them. And then one of them wanted to trap Jesus and say like, oh, I'm going to get Jesus because he thinks that he is God and he's the Messiah. So he says, oh yeah, Jesus, I've got a question for you. And his question had to do with eternal life. He's like, Jesus, what must I do to get eternal life? And Jesus, he says, well, that's easy. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. The guy's like, man, Chucks, yeah, that's a good answer. Like, yeah, okay. Oh, I know. I'm going to ask Jesus one more question. And this time I'm going to get him because I'm going to force Jesus to pick sides. So he asks this question. He says, Jesus, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus is like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you a story. And that's where our story begins. Luke chapter 10, verse 30 and 37. I'm going to read the story and I'm going to explain at the same time. So try to follow along on the screen. Jesus replied and said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Okay, now for those listening to the story, they were like, ooh, this story is going to be good. It's kind of like when you are at a campfire and it's late at night. And then you're like, it was a eerie, like scary night like this. And everybody's like, oh, this is going to be good. Like, why? Well, here's why. Because the road from Jerusalem to Jericho was called the Pass of Blood. And it was called the Pass of Blood because thieves and robbers, they used to hide in the caves. And as people were walking on that road, they would come out of the cave and they would steal, beat up the people, and sometimes even kill them. That's why it's called the Pass of Blood. And so when Jesus says, yeah, there was this man going down there like, oh, this is going to be a good story. Like, sure enough, look. And he encountered robbers. And they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by coincidence, a priest was going down that road. And when he saw him, he passed on the other side. All right, so priests back then, they were the top of the religious society. They were the holy ones. They were like, that there were no holier people than the priests. And this guy sees the guy in need, and he doesn't help. He actually walks on the other side. Well, he goes on, Jesus, and he says, likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Who were the Levites? The Levites were kind of like on the bottom of the religious hierarchy of the time. They were the ones who took care of the temple. They were the ones who they helped her with worship. So they swept the place, they vacuumed the place, they cleaned the place, just like what Conroy does here at Rolando. Like he's at the very bottom, right? So why was Jesus saying this? Because he wanted to say, hey, you first century, your religious culture is messed up. He's like, because you got from top to bottom of religious people who ignored a need and walked on the other side of the street. Then Jesus continues and he's like, but a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. The priest and the Levite felt no compassion, but a Samaritan. It's very hard to contextualize this for us, but when Jesus mentioned the name Samaritan, probably jaws just hit the floor. The air was sucked out of the room because they're like, no way. Like a Samaritan? The Samaritans, they were considered like half-breed, half-Jew, half-Gentile. They were people that the Jews were not supposed to associate with. And so they worshiped in the wrong way, in the wrong place. And Jesus makes the Samaritan the hero of the story. So we can understand. It's like if I were to say a story and I make the hero of the story a Raider fan. Now you get it, right? That's pretty much what it is. Yeah. It's like those degenerates. I can't believe, right? Now, look at what the Samaritan's compassion caused him to do. And came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay. And then Jesus looks at the guy he's telling the story to, and he says, I have a question for you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? And the religious guy was so upset, right? And he's like, And when he answered Jesus, he couldn't even say the word Samaritan. Look at his response. He says, the one who showed compassion to him. He couldn't even say like the Samaritan. I can't say the word. He just said, the one who showed compassion to him. And then Jesus said, now you go and you do the same. Wow. Yes, let's go. You need this one? All right, we want people outside and also online to hear me. So, wow, like what a story, right? Jesus was showing the people that he was telling the story to what compassion looks like. He's like, this is what compassion does. It takes action. It gets involved. Compassion doesn't just sit on the sidelines or walk on by. No, compassion does something. And a pastor in Queens, New York, Rich Viodas, he says this, and I think this is such a powerful quote. He says, the Good Samaritan story is not just an example of compassionate spirituality. It is a critique against religious passivity. If church people won't work for justice and mercy, God will find some other people who will. Wow. Wow. Let's not make Jesus find other people to show compassion, to do his work. No, let us, here at Rolando, let us be the people of compassion. Let us be the church of compassion. And let us be the people that will say, like, we are for you. We're for God. We're for God's kingdom. We're for God's people. We're for you. So what I want to do is I want to quickly show you the progression of compassion and how we can apply into our lives to become compassionate people in the next 5 weeks as we explore more this spiritual journey of 4. So if you'd like to take notes, here's your first fill-in. All right, how can I show compassion to others? Here, the first thing is do acts of kindness. Do acts of kindness. This is the first level of compassion that we can all engage in. This is when the Samaritan, he saw the need, he saw the man, and he's like, I see the need, I'm going to stop, I'm going to help. This level of action doesn't require long-term investment or a long-term commitment, doesn't require a lot of money or relationship. It's just like, hey, I'm aware that there's a need, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to see what I can do to help. The problem is, nowadays, how much are we unaware of what's happening around us, right? Isn't that true? We are unaware of what's happening around us. And so it's interesting because when the boys were little, I went to a field trip with one of my boys' class, and I took my youngest with me. He was a baby, but he could walk already, but he was very little. And we were there, and I got engaged in this conversation with another parent about the gospel. And so I'm like so excited, and I'm talking to him, and I'm pushing the stroller, and we were at the Lions area, and we were going up the hill, and I'm like pushing and engaged in this conversation when one of the kids come, and they're like, Mr. Castro, Mr. Castro. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, you forgot your kid back there. And I look at the stroller, and I've been pushing an empty stroller this whole time. And I'm like, what? So I go back, and I see my kid just crying, like, my dad forgot me, right? But I'm not the only one, and I'm glad. Watch this video of this mom. She's like, where's my kid? Where's my kid? Someone took my kid. Oh my goodness, where did it go? Where did it go? Where is it? And then all of a sudden she's like, wait, oh, I have him. He's in my arms. Right? Like, if you have kids, we've all been there. Being for, having compassion, the first level is to say, like, I need to be aware of what's around me and how can I help. Here's the second one. The next progression of compassion is to make relational and financial investments. Now, we see that the Good Samaritan did this when he said, hey, I'm going to not only help you right now, I'm going to take you to an inn, I'm going to give some money for some further treatment, and then I'm going to come back to check on you, and if you need anything else, I'll pay for it. Right now, it's not just being aware and seeing like where people need help, but it's kind of like I'm going to be intentional on helping someone. And that's the key word right there. This is the next level of compassion. It requires us from moving from being aware to being intentional about it. So things like sponsoring a child. So if you don't know about this, we do sponsor a school and orphanage in Uganda, Africa called Bright Hope. And people have opportunity to sponsor a child of the orphanage and school. And there are several of us in our movement that we sponsor monthly a child. So this is something that is intentional and planned, and you're relationally and financially involved. Another thing is you could be volunteering at any like undersourced school or organization, or like a senior center, or a shelter, or maybe even a local nonprofit that you say, I want to regularly serve here, and I want to make an intentional commitment of relationship and finances. Another one is maybe you're like, I want to become a foster parent. I know many people in our church, they have been foster parents. Many people in our church, they have adopted children. And so maybe that's it. You're like, oh, you know what? Intentionally, I want to relationally and financially show compassion to a foster child. Or even as simple as saying, hey, there's this little league team or a soccer team and they don't have a coach. I'm going to be intentional about coaching this team and spending my time and my finances in this relational investment. And, you know, let me tell you, it takes a lot of compassion. I've done it. It takes a lot of compassion and relational investments because, not the kids are easy, because of the parents of Little League and soccer teams. Those parents are crazy. So it could be something as easy as that. But this level of compassion is really about being intentional. So that's what we're going to ask of all of you in the next 5 weeks as we launch this FOR initiative. And next year, in 2024, we're going to say, hey, we don't want you to just talk about being for people. We want you to show it. We want you to have compassion. So I'm going to ask you a few things. I'm going to ask you to find time or to make time, right, to give your time to serve in our community of Rolando. So once in the next few weeks, we're going to do first 2 Saturdays of November, and you don't have to serve in both. You can serve in just one. But we're going to have service projects, And I want you to pick one project, at least one, and say, I want to serve my community together. And by the way, that's how you get this awesome t-shirt. Don't you want one? Look at that, for Rolando. So right after the service, you can sign up at the table. I see some of you already got it. You can sign up at the table, and then you get a t-shirt. So I'm going to ask you to do that. And second, I'm going to ask you to make a financial commitment. Yes, we're talking about money. I'm going to ask you to say, pray about it and ask God what kind of financial commitment you want to do for us to be for our community, for our church, and for California and Baja California in 2024. Now, if this is your first time here, we don't expect you to participate because that's why you're here. We do this for you, all our first-time guests. And so don't feel compelled to participate, but I will invite you to do something. I'm going to invite you to come back every week for the next 5 weeks because I want you to hear more about what it means to be a person of compassion, but also I want you to see how our church is such a committed, relational church that invests of their time and their money and their talents to be compassionate for people. So stick around, come back, and you'll be able to see that with your own eyes. So level 1, start with an act of kindness. Level 2, make a relational financial investment. And here's the last one. Number 3, be a catalyst for change. Be a catalyst for change. This final stage in compassion is when you become a change agent that enacts this systemic change that will become a permanent change. Now, the story of the Good Samaritan stops right before this next level. But I want you to just picture this with me. Imagine if the street that was referred to as the Path of Blood would have its name changed. Because people would say, this no longer should happen. People shouldn't get mugged as they walk down this road. Let's start a neighborhood watch group. Let's put lights on the street. Let's be there and make sure that people don't get robbed. Imagine if that were to happen and then all of a sudden it no longer is called the Path of Blood, but they would have a better name for it. That's the kind of change that I'm talking about. That's what it looks like to be an agent for change, a catalyst for change. And guess what? You can do this. We can do this as a church. And maybe you can be the one to make the change in your work environment, in your neighborhood, in your school, wherever you are. Or you can be part of something that is bringing about this permanent change. I'll give you a few examples. When I think of this, I think of Marisa Ugarte. Marisa, she started BSCC, which is a nonprofit organization that fights human trafficking in San Diego and Tijuana and the border. And she runs a safe house that our community church movement fully funds. Like we do that, we fund this house. Isn't that amazing? And she takes in women and girls rescued from human and sex trafficking into the safe house. That's who comes to mind. One more person comes to mind, and her name is Kara Lee. You probably know her, right? Yes. One of our own, who started a nonprofit with a mission to create a safe place of belonging where women and children can find support, encouragement, and resources. So hey, you can do something like that. You can plug into an organization that's doing that. But this level of compassion requires the greatest sacrifice. It really does, right? But it also makes the greatest impact. And this is what we're trying to do as a church these next 5 weeks and all of 2024. We want to be a catalyst of change, and we want to show compassion, and we want to show the world who and what we are for. Okay, so for you to understand more and see everything that I said in a more powerful and concise way, we've got a video for you. So sit back and watch this video.
It starts when we're young. We hear voices that help to shape us. Parents, siblings, teachers, neighbors, and friends all provide a chorus that helps us understand who we are. And as years go by, we hear new voices. Voices that sometimes shout more than they speak, telling us again and again that we're defined less by who we are and more by who we are not. Today, it's hard to turn on the news, check social media, or even have a conversation with someone without hearing about who and what we should be against. In the middle of a world full of conflict and polarization, it's hard not to define ourselves almost entirely by what we're opposed to. But there is another way, a better way. Amid all the shouting that seeks to force us to one side or another, there's a more significant voice for us to seek. It's a voice that tells us that we're not defined by all of the things we disagree with, but by who we are in Jesus. Our top priority is to determine who and what we are for. Since its launch, this church and the community church movement have been defined by a single mission: being people, helping people find and follow Jesus. It's what we're all about. It's our mission. It's what we're for. Over the years, the churches and congregations in our movement have been unified in making the mission of finding and following Jesus our top priority. It's been the theme that has brought together Eastlake Church Paradise Village, Iglesia Eastlake, Imperial Beach Church, Playas Church, Rolando Church, Torrey Pines Church, Venice Church, and Sonarrio Church. Within this group are churches with a storied history that have been in existence for over half a century, as well as churches that have been launched within the past year. Churches that serve in the United States and churches that serve in Mexico. Churches that are made up of different ages, languages, backgrounds, and experiences, all of whom are defined not by what they're against, but what they're for. And that's why we're beginning a new journey together. A journey that's simply defined by a single word: for. For is a one-year journey that's all about us growing in our faith, our service, and our generosity in 3 specific areas. We are for our church. Through the ongoing work of our churches, we want to continue to grow and serve the people of our communities by introducing them to the love of Jesus and helping them to follow Him and grow in faith each day. Through this component of the For initiative, we provide for the ongoing operations and support for our churches and their ever-growing congregations and communities. We want to serve and equip the next generation of kids and students as they become leaders in our communities, churches, and world in the years ahead. We also want to provide opportunities for people to grow in their faith through worship services, ministry teams, and growth groups that will help them to learn more about Jesus and put their faith into practice. We are for our community. Through ongoing outreach efforts, mission projects, and strategic partnerships, we want to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the communities where we live, work, and play. We want to mobilize the church in service projects and partnerships to meet tangible needs that make a difference here in our local communities, near in our region, and far across the globe. And we are for California and Baja California. Through this initiative, we want to provide funding and support for our church planting and multiplication efforts on both sides of the border. We also want to provide permanent facilities for our church locations that currently are without one. We believe that new and revitalized churches, both inside and outside our movement, are God's plan to reach a world in need of hope. As we consider the challenge God has put before us in this new season, we're reminded of the words of the prophet Jeremiah. Do good things for the city I sent you to. Pray to the Lord for the city you are living in. Because if there is peace in that city, you will have peace also.
It is more important to be known by who and what we are for than who or what we are against. Jesus knew why He was here on this planet, that he had a mission, and it wasn't for him to be served, but for him to serve and to give his life as a ransom for all.
God has uniquely placed us in and called us to our cities and communities. And in the middle of each of the wonderful, unique, and diverse places where God has set our churches, we are dedicated to being people helping people find and follow Jesus. In our communities and for our communities. It's what we're all about. It's our mission. It's what we're for.
Isn't that encouraging? Isn't that exciting? I love you guys. I love this crowd. So much fun. Hey, so the ushers are going to come forward and they're going to pass out this brochure, and I'm going to explain to you what's inside. So as they do that, I want you guys to notice that there is a shell for the program, and then there's an envelope, a commitment card, and a bookmark. So I want to call you to your attention to the left side of the shell. So when you receive this, just look at the left side of the shell. And we are going, we're taking everything we believe that God has called us, mission and financially, and we're putting all into this year-long focus called FOR. And so here, it's more than a 5-week series. FOR is a 1-year all-church spiritual journey to grow in faith, service, and generosity. So we're calling it a spiritual journey because I'm sure that this time next year, you're going to look back and say, wow, I've grown so much this past year. And so here, let me show you the primary goal. So there we have 2 main goals. Here's the primary goal, okay? Can everyone read that? Primary goal, what is it? I lost you. Okay, so in your shell on the left side, there's a primary goal. What's the primary goal? 100% participation. 100% means everyone participates. So the question that I want you to ask yourself in the next 5 weeks is, what is my next right step? In your own life, in your own person, okay, what is my next right step? And then pray that you would take that step. And so I want everyone to take their next right step to encounter Jesus, serve our community, and grow in generosity. And here is the secondary goal. And as you look at this number, I don't want you to be just scared of it, okay? Because I'm going to explain to you as you see $11.5 million. Wow. Okay. So this is everything we want to accomplish missionally, and it takes money to make it happen. But let me tell you that from the 11.5 million, the first breakdown, which is for our church, that is $9 million, and it's a small increase of 3.4% over this year's. So this year's, you have brought in, with your gift and with your generosity, you brought in $8.7 million. So we're only increasing a little bit to next year. Now you're like, well, but that's a big number. Yes, but we believe in a big God, don't we? And we are a big church. You might look around here and you're like, what? But don't forget, we are 8 locations, 13 congregations of over 4,000 people. So if everyone is obedient to Jesus and say, I'm going to take a next right step in this spiritual journey, 11.5 million is really nothing, because we can bring a lot more than that. So 9 million for our church. Here's the second part of our vision for our community. So $1.1 million. This is from 2 Christmas offerings. This year's Christmas offering, and then next year's Christmas offering. So it's totally doable. And this money goes outside. None of it stays here, because we use this to help strategic organizations, strategic partners that we work with some of them which you have heard. And if you keep coming the next 5 weeks, you'll hear more about these strategic organizations and partners that we do missions together with. And then finally, for California and Baja California, $1.4 million. And this money will go to church planting. If you don't know this, we start new churches because it takes so many churches to reach people. And we start churches not only that are part of our movement, we start independent churches as well. I'll give you an example. You saw in the video a photo of Pastor James praying for Heather Klein and her husband Jason, who just started a church called Salt San Diego down the street in La Mesa. And we are the greatest supporters. We gave them seed money to go and plant this church. They're doing really well. I'm part of the board of elders of that church, and we're so happy to be able to do that. And what we want to do in 2024 is we want to send some of our best leaders who are Jake and Kalia Veda, and we want to send them to plant a church most likely in the North Park area or so. It's going to be an independent church, but we believe in them. We believe in the calling that God has in their lives. So part of this money is going to go to help them plant that church. We also want to get a permanent facility for our Imperial Beach location. I don't think you knew this, but Imperial Beach Church is the largest Christian church in Imperial Beach, and they don't own a location. They are a set-up, tear-down kind of church. So everybody shows up at 6:30 in the morning every Sunday, and they set up, have 2 services, and tear down before noon so that they can get out of that space so that they can do whatever they do in that place. So, like, they've been working so hard, and we want to be in a position to say, we have the money. When something comes up in Imperial Beach, we want to make sure that Imperial Beach Church has a place to call home. And if you look around our campus, aren't you glad that we're so blessed to have not only like a building, we have a whole campus in this amazing location to call home, and we desire that for all of our churches. All right, so I want you to know that it's not about the money, it's about the mission. It's like, okay, God is calling us to do something, and it takes money to do that, but I don't want you to be focused on the money. I want you to be focused on the mission, okay? So let me show you 2 more things that I want you to understand, and it will help you to see like how this all works, okay? One, I want you to go to rolando.church/4, or you can just scan this QR code. And this is going to take you to our 4 spiritual journey, and you can get all the details. In this bookmark, there's also the same QR code. You can scan it if you don't have an opportunity to do that now. You are going to find out all about it. You can get some more details there. And number 2, I want to encourage you to come to all 5 weeks of this series, because I want you to see it unveil every aspect of our mission, of our vision, and hear stories for this journey that we are starting together. So put it on your calendar. Come all 5 weeks of this series. And lastly, you will see that in here there is a commitment card. See, it's the smaller pamphlet commitment card. And I don't want you to fill this out today and turn it in. Not next week, not 3rd week, not 4th week. We're going to collect these on the very last week, the 5th week. So what I want you to do, I want you to take this home. Don't lose it, okay? Put it in a place where you can see it every day so that you can pray and you can ask God and you can talk to your family, you can talk to your friends and say, God, how much do you want me to commit for this spiritual journey of 4? And then the last week, we're all going to bring our commitments and celebrate together. One more thing. So in here, in the shell, once again, you will see some important dates on the right side. Put these on your calendar. Make sure that you sign up for our 4 community service projects and get a nice t-shirt. We'll have more information about it next Sunday, so you can get plugged in. All right, we're going to sing one more song. So let me invite you to stand with me. Will you stand with me? The band's going to come up. And as they do that, what I want to do is I want all of us online, outside, and in here with a lot of enthusiasm, just like the 11 o'clock crowd can do, and read together our verse for the year of 2024 and our verse for this spiritual journey called 4, which comes from Jeremiah 29, verse 7. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Do good things for the city I sent you to. Well, let's try again. Okay, everybody, online, outside, inside. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Do good things for the city I sent you to. Pray to the Lord for the city you're living in. Because if there's peace in that city, you will have peace also. Can you imagine, just picture with me for a second. Can you imagine what could happen if a group of Jesus people like you, like me, like this church, like the churches in our movement, commit their lives in such a way like this, to live like this, to live a life of compassion, to live a life that you stand in the gap, that you declare that you're for God and for God's kingdom as it is in heaven to be here on earth, and for God's people. Can you imagine if we were the group of people to take this posture of service and prayer and sacrifice and generosity for the sake of others? And to be like, I think our lives would change. Our community would change. Our church would change. I want to be known in Rolando, like, even people that say, you know what, I don't believe what those people believe, but I sure am glad that they're here in Rolando. That's the kind of church I want to be. Are you in? Will you say like, God, yes. We're about to sing the song that's it's called Firm Foundation, and declares that Jesus is the foundation that is unshakable, that we all stand on. That He is the one who builds His church, that He is the one who has come to declare the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. And there's a part of the song that says that God has never failed and He will not fail us now. God is with you. God has always been with you. You can look back in your life and see defining moments of like, wow, God was there even though I didn't know, even though I wasn't a Jesus person yet, I can see that God was there. And God is with you, and He'll continue to be with you. And as we enter into this journey together to declare to the world who and what we're for, He won't fail us. He won't fail you. Will you join